Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meuschke.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you are. It's another episode of the Sample Chapter Podcast. I am your host, as always, Jason A. Meuschke. You know what? Actually, let me scratch that. I am your host for now. Today is a very special episode. As you probably saw by the name of this one, this is my episode. Yay! So for right now, it's me. You get me on here talking to you for a few more minutes. But then after this, I hand it over to my family. Yeah, my daughters, Annie and Kaylee Meuschke. They are the ones taking over the show to interview me. And, it's a lot of fun. I had a really good time. And they do a really great job of asking me questions that they came up with. I didn't get to have any say in it. So this is a fun episode ahead, and I really hope you enjoy it. So, but let's go ahead and get a couple things, our usual week-to-week thank yous. PodcastGarden.com is our host site for the show. If you are interested in starting your own podcast, make sure you go there. You can fill out some information, upload your recording, and boom, you are on your way. You've got yourself a show. You can start for free. If you are also interested in finding other shows, they have a whole slew of other types of shows. There's a variety available to you. You can search through and find what you might like, what you might be interested in, and chances are you're going to find it on there. Everything from faith-based shows up to sci-fi and people just talking about whatever strikes their fancy. So that's over at podcastgarden.com. Also want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, U Store All of Warrensburg, Missouri. U Store All is the premium place in the Warrensburg area for climate control and conventional storage, self-storage. They are a fully fenced-in facility with more than 40 cameras recording 24 hours a day. That is all backed up to a DVR. So the manager was telling me that they have more than usually they have about a couple of months worth of footage at any point. So they always know if there's any hijinks going on, if somebody's done something that they shouldn't have, if somebody got in that shouldn't have been in. And what was fascinating, I was talking to them, they've been in business this summer, will be 41 years. 41 years now they've been in business. And in that time, they've only ever had one incident. And that person was in custody within 24 hours. So that's an impressive track record, if you ask me. So, if you want to store your items somewhere and then have them there, they're still in your unit when you come back, make sure you check out U Store All of Warrensburg and look at their website, ustoreall.net. That is the letter U, STORALL.net. It's been a couple episodes since I've talked about rating and reviewing. It's not just for podcasts, it's not just for your favorite shows on other places, but it's also for books. If you hear a book on the show that you went out and you picked one up, make sure that you leave a review for it. Give it a rating, give it a review. Tell the author what you thought of it. And it really it doesn't matter if it's a great review, if it's an okay review. If it's 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars. That kind of information informs the author. Or if it's a show that you're listening to, it informs the people who make that show and informs them of who's listening, who's reading, what did they enjoy, what did they not. And, it's always useful information. So make sure that you're going out wherever it is you are. If you've read a book, make sure you rate it on Amazon or Goodreads, wherever it is you're listening to, or all the above, wherever it is you can. That's always very helpful. If it's a show, make sure you go to iTunes, Google, Stitcher, whatever it is. Make sure you go in there, leave a star review, click on the button, rate it, and it's just a good thing. It really helps out everybody. So like I said, today is my episode. It was a lot of fun. My book, 9 Mile Bridge, came out last week, came out on Friday. Tried really hard to get it out on Thursday and just couldn't quite make it. I was up till like 1:30 in the morning, Thursday night, Friday morning, and then back up again 6 a.m. the next morning trying to fix the files, and the cover art was askew on it, so it wasn't quite lined up. But I learned a lot, and I've learned a lot about what you shouldn't do as well. But so far the book's had a really great response, and I'm just enjoying the published author life now, and it's really a great feeling to have that out there, to have people responding to it as they are. And this is a unique experience, having the tables turned and being interviewed for my own show. My daughters did a really great job putting together information that not only came up with their own questions, which I was not informed of, but they also checked with my sons and my wife, and they pulled the questions together to see what kind of questions people may have for me, what that might be interesting. And yeah, as you can see, we had a lot of fun. Yeah, this is a good episode, I think, and I really hope you enjoy it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way, and I'll hand the show over to my daughters, Annie and Kaylee Meuschke.
Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast. This is Kaylee and my sister Annie.
Hi.
And today we're the hosts doing an interview of our dad.
Hi. Happy to be here.
Want to give us your name?
My name is Jason A. Meuschke, and I'm a thriller author. This is a little awkward being on this side of it. First-time author. My first book just came out this past week. Yeah, I'm a father of 4, as you all know. The grandfather of 4, and married my high school sweetheart. We've been married for 21 years now. Run a podcast, and looking forward to putting out another book as soon as I can.
I asked you to introduce yourself, not talk about yourself.
Not for your life story.
So, we have some questions for you. I'm sure other people would like to know. Annie, would you like to start off any of your questions?
I understand that you've been working on your first book for 8 years, and it's finally out.
Mm-hmm.
Which, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Would you have any advice for other aspiring authors that haven't started, want to start, or have, but like you, but maybe it's been years since?
Okay. That's actually a really great question. And I think it's something a lot of authors struggle with, especially first-time authors. Like myself. I started it in 2010. And so I'm this year would have been 8 years. It was late 2010, so 7+. And when I first started, I didn't know a whole lot about what really I was doing, other than trying to put the story down. And I did a lot of rewriting the stuff that I was excited about. And I think a lot of authors do that. They write down the things that they're excited about. They write those chapters. And that's what I was working on repeatedly. And it took me years before I finally started learning more about the craft. I got in with writing groups and learned more about what I should be doing, how to get better at it. And the writing groups really encouraged me. I listened to a lot of podcasts to learn more about what I should be doing as well. And finally it was the writing group I was in convinced me to try Nanowrimo. And I looked into that, and it intrigued me, the idea of trying to write a novel in 30 days. And at first I wasn't going to do it because, I thought, well, I don't want to come up with something new. But then I looked at what I had, and I essentially had, 3 chapters, more or less. So I decided, all right, I'm going to give that a shot. And that's what I did, was I just took those 3 chapters as a launch point and went from there. And what I learned, what benefited me most, was to just keep writing. I would tend to think and rethink and edit as I went. And what I found was that was the surefire way to get nothing done. If I just unlocked the creative part of my brain and I just went along with it and started writing, then I was getting a lot done. Yeah, right at the end of November, I finished the first draft of 9 Mile Bridge, and that was something that was really great. It was a good feeling, and it's something I've made sure to tell other authors as well, that you don't give up. You dig down, you find ways, find what's working. If you've been working on the same story for a long time and you're not really getting anywhere, then maybe you need to take a look at what is it you're doing, and is that really working, and maybe try something different. That's what worked for me. And
wow, that's a lot of work in 8 years. Wow.
That's a long time.
Yep. And I should say that even then, Nanowrimo, that was 2 years ago that I did that. So it was still another couple of years of editing and changing things out.
Besides the writing, the editing is what drives a lot of people away, I think.
Yeah. But I think editing it turns into a lot of fun as you go, getting into it and shaping the story.
Now, you've always been kind of a natural storyteller. You've always told lots of stories, and you've always been really good at it. Why did you decide 9 Mile Bridge will be your first book?
Thank you. Well, like you said, I'd always thought of a lot of different stories. I'd always dreamt about what would be my first book. I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to write, but I couldn't settle on which one was going to be the right thing. Like, I couldn't see the whole story, if that makes sense. Like, I had a glimmer of an idea, but I couldn't see the whole story in my head. And so back in 2010, when somebody got a hold of me and had told me about 9 Mile Bridge, which is an actual place from my teenage years that I would go to, and it was a supposed haunted area. When I heard that place had been renovated and the bridge had been torn down, and that people still told those stories, that just triggered something in me. All of a sudden, I just, it awoken the writer within me, and I knew what I was going to do, what I wanted the story to be about, how I could update it for today's times. And I was writing faster than I could think a lot of times. And, like I said, I had those 3 chapters, but I wrote those first 3 chapters, I think, in my first day, writing it down. And then I have a file full, like an actual handwritten file full of notes of what I wanted to do throughout the story. And it changed a lot since then, but that was the one that I took that inspiration for an old story and just ran with it. And that was the first time I could really see the whole picture in my head. But that's where I was inspired to do that.
Have you always wanted to be a writer?
I have. Yeah. It's been one of those things that, it always wanted to write. I always wrote stories growing up. I remember doing little books that I would staple the pictures together and stuff. And, I loved doing those kinds of things and creating stories that I would tell. And then writing stories about my friends and I being elite fighting groups growing up, and going on from there. And then, of course, that went into my adult years, having whenever I had children and I got to tell stories to them. I love creating different ideas and different stories, and sometimes scaring you guys, and sometimes just telling something wild and fantastic. So yeah, I think I've always wanted to be a writer. I just never knew how I would go about it, and that's where I'm fortunate. We're fortunate to be in these days where anybody can be, and you can publish on your own.
Is there anything you wish you had known back when you started to save yourself all the time, blood, sweat, and tears?
I think I wish I could have. I would probably go back and tell myself to, not to worry so much about it. Maybe just dive in, learn more about the craft, learn more about storytelling, and how to shape a story, how to put one together, what it takes. Ironically, one of the things that helped me along the way was I took a film class. And I've had a writing education, and I have a degree, but a lot of that was like the mechanics and those type of things, which a lot of it I've forgotten since then. But the film class spoke to me. I think I'm a visual writer, a visual reader, and so taking the film class taught me all about scenes and storytelling from that visual point, and I learned a lot from that. And so I think I would have told myself a long time ago to maybe look into more about shaping a story and just do it is the main thing. Take the time and go ahead and be doing it. It's hard to say sometimes that, if you went back and you changed something, what would that do today? Would you have learned the same lessons? And would you be the same person? Would I write the story the same way I did today? And it's hard to say, but yeah, it would be nice if I had been writing, if I had written this story 10 years ago. So I wonder, that's interesting. It makes me wonder what the story might have been 10 years ago as opposed to today.
What was your biggest struggle writing the story? Like, what kept on,
hanging you up?
Yeah, what kept hanging you up? That's what I was looking for.
My biggest hang up, is probably just myself. I did spend a long time worrying about, what are people going to think? Because
Self-doubt.
yeah, self-doubts. Are people going to laugh about it? Will they like it? Will they not like it? Because like I said, I have somewhat of an education and a degree in writing, but it was in children's writing, and so I was taking that and expanding on it with this story. And one of the things, it would be easy to look back and say, well, I just didn't have the time because I was really busy and so on, but that's not really true. You all remember, I used to wake up, I'd watch TV, I'd play some video games, do different things, come home and maybe go fishing for a while. But these last 2 years, I've been much more serious about my writing. I've taken it as a job because I want to make this a serious career, and I want it to be a serious job because it is. And if you believe in something and you believe in yourself and you want to work hard for something, then you've got to put in that work. And that was something maybe that's what was my biggest hang up, was never really believing in myself to believe I was going to do it. Once I cut out the extracurricular stuff, so now I'd wake up early, and instead of playing a video game or watching TV, I'd open up the laptop here at the dinner table and I would start writing. When I'd come home in the evening, if everybody's watching something that I didn't want to watch, or if maybe you guys were at the park or doing something different, I could open up my laptop or go somewhere else and do a little bit of writing. And I think just maybe that was the hang up, was maybe I wasn't ready to commit.
Finding the motivation.
Yeah, finding that motivation.
So what makes you the most excited now that it's published? Like, what are your big goals?
Right off the bat. Yeah, I hope it sells. Right off the bat, what I'm most excited about is that it's done, and that I get to move on to my next story. I've started a few stories in between. The last edited draft that I did of it back in November, I stopped and sent it off to an editor friend to look it over, and during that time I started on the story. Yeah, without getting too deep into it, I think that's what I'm most excited about, is getting on to the next story. I like marketing. I like the advertising and coming up with ways to promote the book. It's going to be fun going places and signing copies, that kind of stuff. But I'm really looking forward to doing it all over again.
That fed into my next question of if you were working on anything new since 9 Mile is finished.
I am. The next story, I've actually got 2 different stories. I started one, about a year and a half ago. I started a story, and I have all my notes, and I think that's going to become a series. and it's going to be a little bit more on the serious side. It's about a young man in the future, about 15, 20 years in the future from now. A young man who's about to turn 18, and when he turns 18, he takes over control of his father's tech empire. But in the couple weeks before that happens, things start happening around him. There's an attempt on his life, and the biggest thing is that his father, who's been dead since before he was born, sends him a message, or he gets a message from his father.
Ooh.
So that's a series that I'm looking forward to getting into. But my next one, the one that I've already started on, is called the Bandit Series, and that is a alien invasion story that's going to be a little more pulp and more fun, really, than anything. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the length of what 9 Mile Bridge is, but these will be shorter stories and just a lot of fun. It takes place starts in 1989 with an alien invasion, and this 13-year-old boy and his brother, they find a place to hide, and he's been in hiding for 5 years, and, as a 13-year-old might do, to stay in hiding and to entertain himself, he's been collecting video games and movies and stuff to entertain himself. And now he's coming out and doing what he can to save the world. And he looks at himself kind of as a Conan the Barbarian, Highlander kind of guy, just full of 80s references. And, he considers himself kind of a, a Schwarzenegger or Stallone sort of action hero, that he can come out and start doing these things. And, he's going to learn that that's not quite the case. But it's going to be kind of tongue in cheek, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to doing that. I've got several chapters into that, and got some pretty cool aliens and some other aliens from other worlds that are in here as well. And yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. So we can look forward to hearing a lot more from you.
Yeah.
So you have 2 other jobs. And since writing is what you've always wanted to do you find yourself always plotting or in your head constantly thinking about what you're going to do next with your books and how you're going to rewrite things?
Characters.
Oh,
yeah, this is...
Is this Devin's questions?
Yeah, this is Devin's question.
Devin's question.
Start?
Okay.
Our older brother.
It's I think that's just the writer's mind. Everything around you could be an influence. Everything that's happening can strike that bit of lightning inside you. Whether you're standing in line at the gas station or at the theater, whether you're pumping gas, I think the writer's mind, we're always looking around. We're always seeing things happen, and our mind just whirs in, it starts spinning stories of, yep, that red car that just went by. I think I saw them earlier. Yep, they must be on a mission. I work at this place, and there's these 2 customers that come in on a regular basis, and one comes in on one side of the place, and another one comes in and stays at another side of the place. And I find myself thinking about them that, what if one guy is an assassin and the other guy is his contact, and they come here, and this is where they meet to talk. They sit on the other side of the place, so they're not really together, but they're communicating in some way to discuss plans, and he's getting his assignment of who he's got to kill and stuff like that. Things like that cross my mind, watching the people around you. And yeah, I think it's just part of like I said, I think it's just part of the writer's mind that we're always thinking of things like that.
So do you narrate what you're doing? Jason just picked up the pen on the floor and how he's gonna write this.
I don't really narrate my life like that. I guess if I'm fishing, I do kind of
Casts the pole.
Yeah.
Reels in as quickly as he can.
I find I kind of picture myself, being on camera, and all of a sudden, I'll hook that big fish, and oh, son, look at there, I got a big one now, and different things like that. Or maybe if I'm working out, and it's easy to get wrapped up in the moment. So, but yeah.
Well, I think we have just one more question for you. Where can we find you? Where can we get your book? Where can we learn more?
Oh, okay. Well, right now the ebook is available on Amazon. You can order that for the Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so it's free to borrow. The paperback will be coming out in a couple weeks. Doing a few tweaks on the cover so that when the image is blown up, it doesn't look. It'll look really nice. I am, like I said, I have a profile on Amazon. I have a profile now, my author profile on Goodreads. I have a Facebook page, which is author Jason A. Meuschke, that I do post on there pretty regularly, especially lately. With the release of that book, I've been posting up there quite a bit. And I do a part-time blog. I used to blog a lot, but I haven't recently with the onset of the podcast. But I did get back in there. I've actually got 2 blogs I've been in the midst of writing lately that I need to get posted here soon. And that's on WordPress. It's Jason A. Meuschke, or Daydreams of the Writing Fisherman. And then, of course, here on the Sample Chapter podcast.
I'm excited.
Yeah. And you can also learn more information. I'm going to be doing an interview with my dad, Jason, on my YouTube channel, Kaylee Joy. Whenever he gets his paperback books, I'm hoping to be able to do a giveaway and possibly some other little things to go along with it, like bookmarks and things like that. So you can go and see there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I'll make sure to share that on my author page, and then of course as that gets closer, I'll put that up on the podcast as well. So, well, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here today.
Very thrilled, very happy for you, Dad. We've watched you go through this whole process. It's very proud. Very proud.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, this has been special. This is really cool to be. Yeah, it's one thing to be interviewed by a friend or another podcaster, author, people I've come to know, but this is a totally different and very special experience to be interviewed by my family. And I really appreciate that you girls took the time to do this. Thank you very much.
It's even more fun that I know everything that they don't.
As far as the story?
As far as the story.
Yeah.
I've seen chapters they'll never even hear of.
Oh, yeah, that have been cut out. Yep. That's right. Yeah,
all right.
Deleted scenes.
Without further ado, I think we're going to listen to his chapter now.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to be reading the first chapter. This used to be a prologue, but it's the first chapter for 9 Mile Bridge. It takes place in 1988, and then it jumps forward to present time. So that's what I'll be reading. And
all right, let's look forward to hearing it.
Kaylee and I are going to come in with our ice cream and listen.
All right, thanks a lot. Chapter 1. Fall, 1988. The Guns N' Roses anthem of Paradise City thundered from a crimson-colored 1982 Dodge Charger hatchback as it raced along the lonely, moonlit gravel road. Squeezed into the back seat, Bruce bounced his black mane mullet in rhythm along with the song in true headbanger style. The crescendo was building towards the end of the song. Faster, faster. He was unable to keep up with the lyrics at this point, but listened in amazement while Chad, his musically inclined buddy, squished between himself and his other best friend Todd, sang it effortlessly. Chad's naturally curly brunette, shoulder-length tresses flew about as he sang. Bruce found it necessary to keep headbanging in order to avoid getting whipped by Chad's hair, but Todd's blonde crew cut offered no protection. The neck-cramping moves came to an end along with the song, and the music was turned down.
A combination of the music and his excitement about their destination had Bruce beaming. From the front passenger seat, another teenage boy, Greg Rawson, turned around to face them. His medium-length auburn hair clung to his face. Greg and the driver, Billy Brantley, were seniors in their high school. Bruce and his friends, being only sophomores themselves, only knew of the older boys, and if not for Chad working with Greg at Kentucky Fried Chicken, they wouldn't be hanging out tonight. "Pretty freaking sweet, right?" Greg pointed to Billy's sound system. "Bitchin', man," Bruce responded, still grinning. "Chad said you had a rad new stereo, but man, that thing is hardcore." "Thanks," Billy spoke, looking into the rearview mirror at them. "So tell me, man, you mugs really haven't heard of the 9 Mile Bridge?" "No." Bruce shook his head and then nodded towards Chad. "At least not until earlier when Chad called, inviting Todd and me to come along. He said it's a haunted bridge, right?" Billy nodded in response and glanced quickly at Greg. Bruce thought he saw them exchange a quick smile, but it was hard to tell by the dim-lit light coming through the windshield. Greg snickered through his nose. "Hell yeah, man. The whole fucking area is haunted. The bridge and then up the hill from it is a graveyard and old church, and they're both fucking haunted too." "Sounds awesome, man." Bruce feigned genuine excitement, hoping they wouldn't notice. His smile was real, though. He couldn't help it due to Greg's profound use of the English language. He looked at Todd, who rolled his eyes, having apparently caught Bruce's tone, and shared his sentiment. He remembered their conversation earlier, when Chad had called, and the suspicions they had. Just because Chad had been working with Greg for the past few weeks didn't convince Bruce that these seniors didn't have a prank planned for them. A haunted bridge way out in the country? Gnarly. Chad chimed in, excited. "Tell them what you told me about the place. I don't think I explained it very well." Greg turned further in the seat to face them, practically sitting on his knees. A dip in the gravel road bounced the car, sending him into the roof, hitting his head. "Ow!" he complained, throwing his elbow into Billy, who grunted a laugh. Rubbing his head, the pout which had been on his lips spread into a toothy grin as he began weaving his tale. He told them how the decrepit bridge was rumored to have been around since the Civil War, and that desperate Confederate soldiers had kidnapped babies of northern families to toss into the river below to keep them from growing up to one day fight them. "What?" Todd's baritone voice interrupted, scoffing. "Come on, man. No way." Greg stammered, but Billy chimed in from his driver's seat. "Yeah, I don't know what about the soldier babies either, man. I heard it was slave babies. The people who owned this land back then were cruel-ass slave owners who regularly tortured their slaves. Whenever one got pregnant and had a child, it was taken away to the bridge and tossed over." Yeah, Greg's excitement returned. "Maybe that's what it was, slave babies. You know, they don't want more mouths to feed, so..." Greg held his hand out high, then wiggled his fingers for apparent added effect. He slowly lowered it in a falling arc at Bruce's feet, accompanied by a falling whistle sound. Bruce's face soured and retracted his foot away from the make-believe child. Greg allowed the silence to hang in the air for effect. The only other sound was that of the gravel road crunching beneath them. Todd cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "So, do we see these babies at the bridge, or what?" Greg gave a rogue smile. "Not exactly. See, what you do is you sit on the edge of the bridge and dangle your legs, barefoot, with your pant legs rolled up." He spoke that last part slowly, trying to sound creepy. Ever the showman, Bruce thought. "You might hear them crying below," Greg continued, "and that's when you can feel their little baby ghost hands trying to claw their way back up out of the river to escape their purgatory." Purgatory, Bruce thought, impressed Greg would know such a word. He hoped his single raised eyebrow looked curious and not mocking. Greg didn't seem to notice and pressed on. "Once these little devils have climbed your legs to the bridge, they keep climbing, trying to get as far away from the river as they can." "But wait," Bruce questioned. "If you can only feel them, not see them, how do you know they're still moving about?" Billy spoke up again. "You'll know because they leave their baby handprints on your vehicle as evidence." "Creepy, right?" Chad piped, a fixed grin on his face and his eyes wide with excitement. Bruce nodded, but was unimpressed. So far, things sounded lame to him, but he didn't let on. "Yeah, creepy. So, what else will we see?" Greg excitedly told them about the road on the other side of the bridge, how it S-curves up a steep hill and is lined with elm and bur oak trees, which, according to legend, was once decorated with the hanging bodies of slaves as a warning to others of what happened when they try to escape. At the top of the hill, the road dead ends at the small gravel parking lot of a church, with the ancient graveyard situated beside it. It is here that Greg spoke of rumors stranger still, rumors of ghosts lurking around the graveyard, and people residing in the church who perform ritual sacrifices on those unwitting people caught trespassing. Oh, and there's the hellhound, which guards the grounds. Greg spoke, his voice low, as if trying to be creepy. Don't you mean a Black Panther? Billy retorted. Greg glanced at him. No, he stammered. It's a hellhound, 'cause it can vanish. No, dummy, it's a Black Panther. It's been possessed by a demon. Possessed? Ha! Greg snorted. That's just dumb. No one's ever heard of a demon panther. My cousin saw it when he was here last year, swear to God. It's a hellhound, which chases you back to the bridge, and if he catches you, he takes you back to hell with it. Besides, your cousin is making shit up, 'cause there ain't no panthers in Missouri. Oh, but there's hellhounds, Billy acted shocked. Bruce closed his eyes and groaned inwardly as the boys argued on. At this point, he was no longer convinced he'd see anything at all tonight, as the hosts can't even get their story straight. He glanced sideways, seeing Todd reacting much the same as he, and even Chad looked at a loss. Chad spoke up. Hey guys, come on. What's the difference, really? So there's supposed to be a creature out there guarding the area. Don't let it catch you, right? Greg pointed his thumb at Billy. He'll see the difference if I'm right. He gave a hurt look to Billy and mumbled, Fucker. Bruce thought he heard Billy respond, but it was barely audible. Then he spoke louder. Yes, but don't look it in the eyes. Oh, right! Greg's barely contained excitement returned. Greg continued, eyes wide. Okay, so here's the deal, dudes. Don't look it in the eye, because if you do, you're going to die 3 days later. Bruce nodded his head, unsure which part confused him more. So this thing. Black Panther. Hellhound. Creature, Chad added. The creature, Bruce went with Chad's description. So I understand. To keep from being killed by it, you just don't look in its eyes. Greg scoffed, but Billy spoke up. No, it'll kill you the same as any predator, but if you can escape it, you need to avoid its eyes. Billy's eyes caught Bruce's in the mirror and held them. By locking eyes with it, you create a sort of killer bond with it, and 3 days later, he comes stalking your soul. Bruce felt the hairs on his arm raise and a tingling sensation on the back of his neck. He still didn't believe in these stories, but he had to admit Billy was much better at telling them than Greg. Moments later, the Charger turned a corner on the gravel road, taking them into the surrounding woods, and the car's headlights illuminated the ancient bridge before them. Having expected something wood and rickety, Bruce was surprised to see a steel truss bridge. First impressions made him think this couldn't be the old bridge described, yet as the car approached, the rust-covered steel became more questionable, not to mention barely there wood plank decking. Bruce spied a couple of corroded holes in the inclined end posts, and some of the bracing looked to be held together only by the buildup of rust. Billy turned off the headlights, but left the parking lights on so as not to leave them in complete darkness. Don't want to give us away, he said softly, just in case. He rolled his window down and craned his neck to listen outside. Greg did the same now, sitting back in his seat, facing forward. No one spoke, yet Billy's words echoed in Bruce's head as the car rolled cautiously off the gravel and onto the wooden planks that creaked under the strain. It was just wide enough for one vehicle. The shine of the full moon gave the structure a shadowy, skeletal look as they passed through. Occasionally, Bruce spied another gap in the steel where moonlight peeked through. The car continued moving at painstakingly slow pace until, at last, it reached the other end. We're not stopping on the bridge? Todd said. No, not yet, Billy said, turning the wheel. We have to get turned around first. Greg turned to face the back again. Oh yeah, I forgot, he spoke softly. In the back of his mind, Bruce wondered why everyone was talking so quietly. Then again, it felt right to do so. Greg continued. Another part of the legend of this place is its ability to kill your car when you park it on the bridge. Like when you turn it off and then come back to it later, it's dead. So you have to push it back to the start of the bridge where it will miraculously start again. A guttural laugh escaped through his teeth. Why is that? Bruce spoke. Having finished turning the car around, Billy pulled back onto the bridge and shut it down. He turned to face Bruce. It's the power of this place, man, and it doesn't want you to leave once you've arrived. Happened to me the first time I came. I thought maybe the guys who brought me pulled a spark plug or removed a lead to the battery, but no. Worse yet, we were facing the other direction. He pointed his thumb behind Bruce. Everyone was freaking out when we tried to leave. Someone thought they saw the creature. He gave Greg an eye roll. Greg smirked. Billy continued. And we had to push their van backwards off the bridge with someone who didn't know how to drive in reverse. Almost got it wedged between the railing twice. Bruce nodded his understanding, though he made a mental note to keep an eye on them. If he caught them doing something to the car, he'd know then that this was just a setup. Grabbing his keys from the ignition, Billy looked into the mirror, a sly smile on his lips. You mugs ready for this? 300 feet to the bridge. Almost an hour ago, Bruce had been unable to contain the excited smile on his face, thrilled from having arrived at a place known only as 9 Mile Bridge. He thought he was in for a good time, but now Bruce was no longer smiling. Instead, he moved his feet as fast as they could carry his terrified soul. 200 feet to the bridge. Avoiding the winding downhill road, the boys escaped into the woods in unspoken agreement, choosing instead the treacherous downhill jaunt as the quickest way back to the bridge. Bruce raced faster than he could react and collided against the solid trunk of a tree for the second time already. This time he grunted hoarsely, feeling the wind partially knocked from his lungs, making him gasp for air. Yet he refused to stop moving. Over his shoulder he heard the clumsy footfalls and snapping of brush, telling him that his friend Todd and Chad were still there. On the hill behind them, a roaring fire overtook the ancient chapel, casting obscure shadows before them and further frustrating Bruce's sight and depth perception trying to navigate the rough downhill terrain. "Shit!" Bruce exclaimed, wincing and nearly losing his balance as a low branch whipped his forehead, his glasses the only thing saving him from possibly losing an eye. Even without seeing the wound, he knew he'd been cut, feeling the warm fluid on his face creeping into his right eye and filling it with tears. Raising one hand out front to deflect more branches, he tried to wipe his eyes with the other hand as he ran, when suddenly the ground leveled out. His body gave into momentum, bending his torso over, his knees nearly touching his chest before reflexes uncoiled his legs, launching him into a skid across the gravel road on his hands and knees. Bruce felt a new panic rising as he searched the area around him for his glasses with bleeding, sediment-filled hands. A crash behind him drew his attention in time to see Todd burst from the trees near him. With Chad so close behind, he ran into the burly farmer. "I can't find my glasses," Bruce squeaked, while accepting a hand from Todd to get back on his feet. Breathing too heavy to speak clearly, Todd tapped the side of his head and pointed to Bruce. "Here," he gasped. As if knowing exactly what he meant, Bruce felt the weight of them dangling from his ear. Grabbing them, he breathed a sigh of relief that, although a little twisted, they were still intact. Adjusting them back on his face, he saw for the first time they'd come out of the woods near the bridge where Billy's hatchback Charger was still waiting for them. "Oh, God, Billy," Bruce thought as the boys raced to the car. Witnessing that creature attack Billy replayed in his head, and the shriek of his screams still echoed in his ears. But what was forever burned into Bruce's mind was the hollow crunch and deafening silence that followed after the beast had ceased Billy's screams forever. 150 feet to the end of the bridge. "Here, Bruce," Chad spoke, bringing him back to the present. "I found his keys, up there." Chad thumbed behind them and climbed into his usual seat in the back. Todd was already on the other side, opening the passenger door. "Let's go!" Bruce shook his head to regain focus on their dire straits. Plenty of time to mourn later, I hope, he thought, and inserted the key into the ignition and turned. Nothing. Bruce slid the manual gear shift into neutral and popped the clutch with his foot, ensuring the car was ready to start. He turned the key again. Still nothing. No, no, no! Todd groaned and began pressing buttons on the dash, one of which ejected the Guns N' Roses cassette they'd been jamming to earlier. Make sure the lights are off, he ordered. They are off, Bruce responded, and tried the key again in disbelief. Are you serious? It's fucking dead? Chad sounded panicked. No one answered him. No one needed to. They were all thinking the same thing. The car had died, just as the legend had said it would, meaning it won't start again until they push it to the other end. Come on, Bruce said, releasing the emergency brake and pushed his door open. He stole a glimpse behind to make sure it was clear, then got out. His eyes were immediately drawn to the red glow in the night sky where he knew the church was still burning. Turning his attention back to the emergency at hand, Bruce positioned himself in the door jamb on the driver's side of the car so he could reach the steering wheel if needed. Forgetting his raw hands, he winced when placing them against the cold steel and pulled them away for a quick inspection. In the full moonlight, he saw the multiple cuts in small sections where the skin had been peeled back. Thankfully, the bleeding had stopped for the most part, and he decided this was no time to worry over it. Don't be such a pussy, Bruce thought, grabbing hold of the steel frame. The metal felt like it was made of ice against his palms, and he was suddenly aware of tiny pebbles tucked under the skin, which may as well have been spiked marbles for all the pain he felt shooting through his hands. He placed his right shoulder into the corner of the door jamb to alleviate some of the pressure in his hands as he and his friends pushed the dead vehicle toward the end of 9 Mile Bridge. 130 feet to go. Holy shit! There's child prints all over the back window, came Chad's frantic voice, pushing from the back end. Still pushing, Bruce craned his neck, peeking at the windows nearest him, and noticed for the first time what appeared to be small, child-sized hand and footprints now visible in the foggy glass. How can this be? Bruce thought, still not fully believing what his eyes were seeing. Yet in his mind, he could picture exactly what the legends of 9 Mile Bridge had spoken of. Ghostly beings, mostly children, trying to gain access back into the world of the living. But for Bruce, he couldn't help but to picture them disfigured and rotted like little zombie babies. Bruce shook his head in hopes to clear his eyes of what his fear was making him see. He felt the trickle of cold sweat running down his neck and along the spine. The cool October air did nothing to ease the heat under his denim jacket, but he knew the air had nothing to do with his trembling hands. Keep pushing, Bruce ordered. 95 feet to go. Why did I agree to this? Somewhere behind Bruce there came a roar like nothing he had ever heard before. It reminded him of a lion he'd heard once at a zoo, but it was as if at the end of a long tunnel. The hollow sound echoed down the valley, and Bruce felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. He stopped pushing to look back, finding that his friends had done the same. Up the hill where the graveyard was located, they could see the church flames burning even higher, making the appendage-like shadows of the forest seem as if they were reaching out in their direction along the road. From their midst, a pair of luminous emerald eyes materialized. Bruce felt hypnotized by them, unable to look away as he watched them as they glided downhill, passing behind trees yet never blinking, as if keeping their prey transfixed while it emerged onto the gravel road just beyond where they had been moments ago. The creature paused to sniff the road. A low growl rumbled from its throat like the sound of distant thunder. Reacting by instinct, Bruce ducked closer to the car and bit his lip so as not to cry out. During the events which had taken place at the church, he never got a good look at the beast which killed their friend, but now he watched in fearsome awe as it stood in the light of the full moon. It stood near 4 feet tall at the head, with a mane of wiry, raven-colored hair around the neck which framed the hairless gray face. There was no forehead, Bruce could see, just a long muzzle which ended in a noseless snout, and teeth too large for its jaws, more like a small alligator than any hound. The body had an unnatural hourglass shape, with a barrel-shaped chest narrowing at the waist, then widening again at the hips. A slender mohawk of hair ran along the spine to the rear haunches, with a matching hair cluster at the end of the tail. Thickly muscled legs moved with immense paws, and as it turned, Bruce noticed a tuft of the mane on top of the head between its large ears, which seemed to stand on end as the beast looked around. It walked in circles, sniffing the ground, the glowing emerald eyes flashing this way and that, and Bruce realized it hadn't yet seen them, but it was searching. "It's nearsighted," he thought, feeling a bit of relief, ran a scarred hand through his sweaty black mane mullet. Yet he knew it wouldn't be long before it picked up their scent. "Damn it, man! Get the car off the bridge or we'll never get away," Todd said in a hoarse whisper, throwing his shoulder into the back of the car. 60 feet to go. Bruce regripped the door jamb with the windshield, pressing his weight into the momentum started by Todd. He's right, Bruce realized. Even if we left the car and ran for the end of the bridge, and the supposed safety from the beast by having crossed that threshold, how much longer before the people at the church come after them? Without the car, we're still dead. As if answering their desperate cry for escape, the creature let out another terrifying roar. Bruce knew without looking, but a glance over his shoulder told him the beast had found their scent and was just stepping onto the bridge. Turning his attention back to the heavy task at hand, Bruce placed his left hand on the door, hoping to gain more leverage to push with. Instead, his efforts forced the driver's side door to swing wide open with a metal grinding creak. His balance thrown off by the sudden forward burst, Bruce stumbled to one knee before quickly regaining his footing. "Shit!" Bruce groaned, wishing he could rub the hot, stinging sensation growing in his knee, but he knew better, placing his hands back into the door jamb. If the car had slowed at all, he couldn't tell, as Todd pushed his bulky farmer's body to its limits. Bruce could hear the results of his friend's efforts in their heavy breathing and grunts, but Chad was steadily breaking down in desperate tears. The terror, which was now chasing them all, pushed him past his limitations of rational behavior, and his sweaty hands slipped on the trunk as if unable to grasp hold and help. 45 feet to go. Please, God, let us make it. Bruce's glasses steamed with fear, but he dared not to wipe them, choosing instead to peer over them, just in time to turn the steering wheel and keep the car from riding up on the bridge railing. Another look behind showed Chad practically sprawled across the trunk, bawling by now, his voice rising in pitch each time the creature made a sound as it closed in on them at the halfway point. Todd shoved on in red-faced determination, sweat pouring from his head, and spittle flew from his mouth with each labored breath, yet at times Bruce thought he was lifting the vehicles back in entirely off the ground, seeming to hardly notice Chad's condition. 25 feet. Bruce bowed his head to stare at the road in concentration, driving with his legs, shoving from the shoulders. A spot in his low back felt like it would cramp at any moment now. The car listed again, this time scraping the front fender before he cranked the wheel, and just before it could wedge itself against the railing, which would surely mean death to them all. 19 feet. Oh, everything is hurting. Refusing to look any more, Bruce could hear the closeness of the beast approaching them, the thud of each padded claw, and the click of every claw on the wooden railings. In his mind, Bruce could feel its vile breath on his neck, the acrid flesh and blood odor invading his nostrils while the glowing, soulless eyes bore into the back of his head. 13 feet. I wish I was home. Almost there, Todd wheezed. 9 feet. I love you, Mom and Dad. Bruce pulled the wheel one last time to keep the car on course in the middle of the bridge and spun on his heel. As his glasses slid off his nose, falling somewhere unknown, he ran to the back of the car and his friends, the beast almost on top of them. 5 feet. So close! The car's nose passed over the edge of the bridge, and all three boys screamed in defiance as they were about to cross over themselves. The beast roared and leaped. 0. Well, there you go. That's the world debut of my story, 9 Mile Bridge, as read by me. I hope you guys enjoyed this show as much as I had fun making it with my kids. Hey, don't forget to rate us, don't forget to like us, and share with your friends. Thank you so much for checking in, and be sure to come back next week. We've got another author, another story, and another sample chapter. Thanks a lot. Bye.